it's an exciting field to be in right now, and it's exciting to look at as we move closer and closer to the ubiquity of wireless signals. I mean, they're everywhere. How can you understand what's going on and affect the network in some way, and how can we make the network more robust? Looking at it from just the cybersecurity standpoint, we have a plethora of experts here that know how to really dig into systems and understand the vulnerabilities of them.
From early 2022 through late 2024, a threat actor publicly known as APT28 exploited a known Windows print spooler privilege escalation vulnerability to remotely and wirelessly access sensitive information from a targeted company network. APT28 executed the attack by compromising less secure Wi-Fi networks of multiple organizations that were in close proximity to the intended target. The attack did not require any hardware to be placed in the vicinity of the target company's network. It was executed remotely from thousands of miles away and used system-level privilege exploitation to install backdoor access and steal credentials. This incident brings to light the critical role that software plays in the security of modern-day wireless communication systems, both in the military and civilian realms. Welcome to the SCI podcast series. My name is Mike Winter, and I am a Vulnerability Analysis Technical Manager for the SCI CERT division. Today, I'm joined by Joe McIlvenny, a Senior Research Scientist also in CERT. Today, we are here to talk about this emerging threat landscape of wireless attacks and efforts underway here at SCI to address them. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you.
This is a first SCI podcast for both of us. So let's start by telling our audience about ourselves, what brought us to the SCI, and the work we do here. So, Joe, let's start with you.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks. So I have a background and education in computational physics. I did my undergrad in computational physics, and then I have a master's in applied physics. And out of school, I worked for a contractor for NOAA. And so this was my first exposure. I worked in the satellite department there. Script slinging, essentially, writing scripts that take the satellite data, process it, working with the scientists there that write the models for the codes for the weather things, the weather models. And so this was sort of my first exposure to wireless and RF comms, things that, remote sensing. And it was pretty cool. And from there, I then worked at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab down in Maryland. And there I worked with some really great people over the years doing all kinds of things, from designing and building sensor systems, magnetic field sensors, quantum sensors, things like that, and also wireless RF sensors. About half of the time I was there, I was in the communications branch. So what brought me to the SCI is, as I was working in the wireless branch there, helping design systems for users, customers, the military, and doing test and evaluation of those, you start to see things that, security issues or things that can be exploited. And what really drew me to the SCI then is this kind of new area of, as you have this world of wireless technology, wireless communication systems and RF, and this world of cybersecurity, cyber ops, and that as we move towards a more wireless world, those two things are really starting to converge, right? And just the ubiquity of wireless sensors, it's everywhere, right? So, it grows to be it's a growing concern, I think, and should be for folks that have communication systems that overlap with cybersecurity systems.
That's incredibly impressive, Joe. That's not going to be a fun one to follow up. I would invite our listeners right now, if you're going to have a chance to let your mind wander, it's probably my turn listening, hearing what I did as a background. So this is not going to be fun to follow up. So my background is in the military. I was in the Air Force for 24 years, and I started off in special operations. From there, went into intelligence primarily, where I worked in national and tactical intelligence operations. And then the third half of my career was primarily in cyber operations, in support of cyber command. So not with the extensive background that you have in RF and physics and all that other things. So I appreciate that. So thanks, Joe.
Yeah.
I joined the SCI primarily because the SCI has that reputation of having that objective, highly specialized, long-term research and development and analysis that is definitely needed across all walks of the department. And I really have always been interested in AI solutions in terms of the high ops tempos and things like that you have in the Department of Defense. So I always found that to be a very fascinating topic to try to help out our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines in a lot of what they do day to day. So that's what brought me to the SCI, and I work in the vulnerability analysis team, and we specialize in vulnerabilities, and vulnerabilities exist everywhere. So what are we going to do about it? So it's kind of a challenge. So with that, I'm going to open with a very important question. I think first and foremost, our listeners want to know, Joe, what is your walk-up song when you enter the office for a meeting, or you just enter the office in general? You come through those doors of SCI.
That's a good question. I am a metalhead at heart. I've always been a heavy metal fan. That's a tough one. I think anything from, the first 4 Black Sabbath albums are a given, right? Always classic. And, there's some good, when you need more of a pump up, something faster. I've also always been a fan of thrash. So thrash metal, like some good old Metallica or Megadeth. Depends on the day and what's on the list. What about you?
I like it, Joe. I was doing a little mind reading, and my mind reading was off. I was thinking of Barbie, Barbie world, but I was
Some
wrong.
days. It depends on the day. You never know.
Mine would absolutely be Led Zeppelin's Kashmir. It's cinematic. It's very confident.
Nice.
I feel like I'm wearing a cape.
Yeah.
When I hear that song, so that just makes me think when I walk through the doors of SCI. That's my go-to. Last question before we dive into the actual podcast here. Consider we're going on a podcast journey together. Who's the better singer, Steve Perry or Anil Panetta?
Steve Perry, right? No one can sing it. No one can make you feel like, what does a broken heart feel like Steve Perry, man. He's a classic.
Steve Perry's probably not listening to this podcast, but if he does someday, he'll be very proud. Yes. So thank you. All right, so let's spelunk into wireless attacks. A report from the Office of the Director of Operational Test and Evaluation stated that our nation's cyber posture remains at risk from attacks by unconventional threats such as those posed by radio frequency-enabled cyber attacks where cyber payloads and radio emissions disrupt systems, or direct attacks on weapon systems, data buses, and control systems that are essential to aircraft, ships, and vehicles. That's a long sentence. So the APT-28 attack discussed in the introduction is an example of a targeted attack, demonstrating the ability to sidestep MFA devices. So what other types of attacks are we seeing in the field right now?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? And just to elaborate on the APT attack, 28 attack a little bit, right? So that nearest neighbor attack was a really unique and creative way to get at information that they were trying to get, right? So they attempted to do a password spray, right, and gain credentials from their targeted company, but they found that they couldn't get into the system because they had multi-factor authentication things, right? So your YubiKey, right, or Duo, right, on your phone, things that require multi-authentication things, right, instead of just a password. So what they did was then they targeted organizations that were in close physical proximity to the target. And they found that those organizations had less secure Wi-Fi things. And they had what was called a multi-home Wi-Fi. So what that means is it has an Ethernet connection and a wireless connection, right? And they were able to get into those Wi-Fis and then use that to access the target company's Wi-Fi. And what they found was that while the network and the system had multi-factor authentication, the Wi-Fi was not protected by multi-factor authentication, MFA, right? So what they did was, now that they had the passwords that they had got in the separate campaign, they used the local, the near proximity organizations to get into the target organization to steal the data and the information that they were looking for. And what's really interesting about it, and to do that, they exploited, as you mentioned at the beginning, there's a print spool privilege vulnerability, and we have the number here somewhere. We'll put the link to it in the podcast transcripts. But that vulnerability allows someone to, in the print spooler, it uses JavaScript essentially to help with the layout of when you send a print job to the printer from your computer, right? And what it does is it allows system level access to the user, right? And so by exploiting this vulnerability, they were able to escalate their privileges capabilities to system level, so that then they could go in and insert malicious code to give them a backdoor, right? Like you said, to be able to steal the information, to steal credentials, to get in. So, but again, like what's really interesting about that particular attack is that they didn't need anybody or any devices in the area, right? They did this attack completely remotely from the other side of the globe. Mm-hmm. It didn't require anyone to be here by the organization, right? So a little disconcerting, a little concerning.
Yeah, because there's a level of like sophistication there too as well, and a level of persistence by our adversaries.
Yes.
So it's easy to look the other way and wish it away, but that's the adversary that's on our doorstep.
Yeah.
If they want in, they're going to find a way to get in.
That's right.
And it sounds like the RF is a pathway that is exploitable, and we might have some openings there.
Right. Some other examples, right? So of course there's the Typhoon APT, and they are always in our infrastructure, right? Mm-hmm. There's been reports about that out there. And what they do, right, they really look at exploiting industrial SCADA systems, the Wi-Fi in industrial SCADA. They'll insert like rogue access points in the vicinity of a target, right? So that it gives them, again, exploiting Wi-Fi vulnerabilities or lack of multi-factor authentication on the Wi-Fi, right?
Right.
To be able to get into a network by hopping across Wi-Fi connections, access points. They often have like a compromised Internet of Things devices. So if you think of IoT things, they're everywhere, right? Bluetooth, speakers, headphones, watches, your refrigerator, like everything, right, is somehow connected.
So I think if you and I were texting right now, you'd be getting a lot of surprised face emojis from me and a bunch of grimacing face emojis from me right now, because that does not sound like a healthy place to be. So,
right.
So here's kind of a fun question for you. So if you had a fantasy draft of cybersecurity practices, given what we just talked about, what would you pick in the first round, given what you just said?
Oh man, that's a good question. I think again, right, like it's hard, right? Like there are so many ways to be able to protect the system, but there's always a loophole, right?
Yeah.
Like we just talked about, but I think doing things like ensuring that your software patches are up to date, that's always important, right? And NIST provides guidance on how to do that, right? And lots of others too. Having things like, the traditional things that we talk about, strong passwords and, not
exactly
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right?
Yeah.
And other things like that, right? And then, another thing that we talk about, right, at least at the enterprise level, really is having role-based privileges, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're logging into the system, like you can only do so many things based on the role, right? Whether you're an administrator or you're just a normal user or you're a visitor or whatever, right? Like each role has a different set of things that they should be allowed to do, different set of privileges within the system, right?
Yep.
And having guardrails around like not being able to skip across those, right? Like right. I log in and I say sudo do whatever, right? Like,
right.
So things like that.
Yeah. So how have software and cybersecurity played key roles in these exploitations? So we've covered a couple of them right now, but let's hone in a little bit more on that one right there. So where exactly have those software and cybersecurity played key roles in those exploitations? Yeah,
so looking across the OSI stack, right? At all of the layers, there are exploitations and vulnerabilities at each layer, mm-hmm. right? And just to do a comparison between like some of the traditional wired system versus a wireless system, right? So when we talk about security in a wired system, we usually talk about like confidentiality, right? So that's ensuring sensitive info is only accessible to authorized users, and it can't be intercepted or unintentionally disclosed to unauthorized users, right? Mm-hmm. So confidentiality. And then integrity, that's a guarantee that data remains, that the data remains accurate and unaltered, right? And that's to prevent unauthorized modifications or corruption to the data. And then again, in wired systems, the third one is usually availability, right? Is that data available to the authorized users when they want it, when they need it?
Right.
In contrast with the wireless type systems, security in wireless systems, those things all apply, right, too. But what we usually talk about in wireless systems is covertness and robustness, right? So what covertness is like that's your measure of difficulty. How hard is it for an eavesdropper to identify the existence of your link? That's detection, right? And what's the measure of difficulty for them to intercept data, to extract data from the wireless link that you have? That's interception, right? And then robustness is the measure of how difficult it is for an attacker to disrupt the link, right? So think like anti-jamming or jam resistance, right? That sort of thing. And what's different, in both places from a security and a data perspective, right? Both networks need channel coding. Both networks need signal processing. But the fundamental approaches are different, right? So, for example, in a wired system, you have like a wired gigabit Ethernet connection, right? The quality of the copper wire and the winding adapts how the channel coding is done, right? And the signal processing on the network. And the most reasonable way to intercept data in that situation is a wiretap, right? Like you have to have physical access to the wire to be able to extract that data. In contrast, on a wireless system, right, like the channel coding and the signal processing are potentially public, right? Because you're broadcasting over the air. And those, just because of the wireless nature of the links and the connections, right? And the implementations need to be they need to have the robustness incorporated into that design, right? Because it's certainly much easier for someone to intercept a wireless signal than it is to find the wire and tap it, right? So that's part of what makes the security of wireless systems harder, right? And even at you can say, well, we have it encrypted, right? So our signal's encrypted, it's fine because we're encrypted, and that gives you a level of security, but there are there is a whole set of things that you can gather below the encryption layer in the OSI stack, right? At the physical layer, I can see what frequency you're broadcasting on potentially. I can, if I'm sophisticated enough, I can capture your hopping rates, how frequently or quickly are you changing frequencies to try and obscure things. I can, do a pattern of life assessment, like what time of day do you broadcast, how often do you broadcast, and you can do things like triangulation. If you have sensors up and around, like where's your location, like all of those things are potential vulnerabilities that can be captured below the encryption layer, right? And that's notwithstanding vulnerabilities in encryption, implementations and stuff too.
So for those of you who don't know Joe, I think we all sort of understand him better, and especially through his walk-in song, because I can understand why you listen to thrashing metal and everything as you walk into the office. I think I would too, if that's the matrix that I see every day all around me. So with that, let's ask you a fun question, and we'll just lighten it up a little bit here as we move on to the harder ones. Would you rather be forced to use public Wi-Fi for a month or run the default passwords for a week?
Oh, man. Boy, that's tough. Probably, I would rather do neither, right? Given the choice. I mean, I guess a public Wi-Fi, as long as you have the guardrails up to protect yourself, right? So things like I have secure passwords. I, can monitor the system to know if there are, people trying to gather my information, right? And you can put sensors up to do that, an SDR with a receiver, and looking for anomalies and rogue signals.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not so sure if I want to trust that wheel in the sky, but I'll probably just write a letter. All right, so back to the more serious questions here. Well, Joe, the next question is the ODT&E report that we referenced earlier went on to state that future cyber strategies, resource allocation, development, and testing must consider such cyber threats. So what efforts are underway here at the Software Engineering Institute on this front?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? So certainly we have a lot of things going on. Looking at it from just the cybersecurity standpoint, we have a plethora of experts here that know how to really dig into systems and understand the vulnerabilities of them, right? And taking that expertise and trying to apply it to wireless systems is a lot of what we do, right? And that's, like we talked about, that's my background, and that's why I'm here. And we have a laboratory set up here on campus that is looking at the 802.15.4 standard. That's where we started. And so that IEEE standard is the basis for a lot of mesh network type things. So think of your Internet of Things. Those all sit on 802.15.4 and Wi-Fi and Bluetooth to some degree too. But things like Internet of Things protocols and waveforms, Zigbee, YSUN, those type of things. And what we're looking at is, there's some level of inherent chaos in the network when you set up all these nodes and they're talking to each other and nodes are coming on and off of the network. And what we're looking at is, are there vulnerabilities that we can exploit either at the physical layer below encryption or at some of the higher layers in the network layer of the ASI stack where some of the routing happens for a mesh network example, right? It's handled at least in Zigbee, it's handled at the network layer, right? And so what we're looking at is, how can you understand what's going on and affect the network in some way to say like, oh yeah, that thing happened, and how can we make the network more robust? Like we went back to talking about, just the reliability. Can you can we intercept it? Can we get data from it? How can we affect it? Can we take nodes down and have the network get confused? How does it reconfigure? What's the sort of latency in the messages when that sort of thing happens? And by being able to understand those things and mitigate against them, right? Like we can help to have a deeper understanding of how we can implement things in software and to help the security of more important networks than just public available ones, right? And so, along those lines, it's interesting, right? It's an exciting field to be in right now, and it's exciting to look at, right? Like where, as we move closer and closer to the ubiquity of wireless signals. I mean, they're everywhere, right? You sit down at your desk, and you've got you're on the Wi-Fi now because we don't normally plug into Ethernet anymore. You've got a wireless mouse that's Bluetooth. You've got your wireless headphones for your Zoom calls or whatever. You've got your phone probably sitting on the desk beside you that is connected to—
Or behind me.
Or behind me, yeah.
You heard it
wherever.
ringing earlier.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly, right? But, all of those things are different, compared to 15, 20 years ago when, everything was still wired. And it doesn't make it less secure. It just makes it concerning that we have to understand those vulnerabilities and where they exist.
Yeah, the thing I want to build on, especially for the listeners, and especially you, Steve Perry, if this is the first time you listen to this podcast, but, what Joe just described, there was all the wonderful things that people at SCI are doing, and I'll give a little bit of a different perspective. Like, as a listener, you can't really see what these folks are doing, but I can explain exactly what our teammates, what is inspiring them. So people do not join the SEI to hide. They don't join the SEI to cower or to play it safe. You're coming here because there's something that's calling you and telling you need to do something about it, and you need to serve the public interest. Yeah. So you have an objective idea about something, and you're willing to go that extra mile. This is the vehicle that you use. This is an FFRDC. This is why we come here. So we're just surrounded by these exceptional people building out the horizons and the pathways of the future, and working and other things that Joe was kind of covering was the collaborative partnerships that we have, whether it's domestic or internationally, across academia, government, industry. It doesn't really matter. We're willing to do whatever it takes to basically provide that future state that we need to be in to serve the public. So it's such an exceptional place to be, and a lot of the things that Joe just highlighted are examples of the wonderful things that people do here to serve our to serve the community going forward. So one kind of fun question before I get to my next question is, what is a cybersecurity hill you are willing to charge with a fully loaded laptop? One that you are not going to stop believing. So what is, out of all those wonderful things, what would you put up at the top? Like, man, this is one I'm willing to charge that hill with my laptop.
That's a good question too. I think, again, like I said, just finding ways to make wireless more secure, right? So, it's a crazy time in the world right now, and helping people, not only just the military, right, but helping folks to understand and raise that awareness of there are a lot of bad actors out there, right? And we've highlighted some of them here today, but there are more, right? And just raise awareness, right? Let people know that my cell phone is a tool that just lets me do whatever I want, right? There are so many things in today's world that it's a super powerful computer in your hand, right? And it's connected to everything, right? Wi-Fi and cellular networks and Bluetooth and everything, right? And just help people understand that it's meant to do all of those things, and you should absolutely use it to do all of those things, but do it smartly, right? Understand that yes, there's a reason why we say don't use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as your password. Yes, it's easy to remember, but it's also easy for people to crack.
Great Spaceballs reference.
Yes.
And it's fun. A lot of what I learned from Joe to all the listeners, a lot of it has to do too with it's very easy to think about cybersecurity and think of it from a device. But we oftentimes forget the RF side of it. And they are not going their separate ways. They are converged completely and going in the exact same pathway together. So, which leads me into our next question here. As a federally funded research and development center, a core aspect of our work is transition, okay? Yeah. Not just building something for us to look at and celebrate and walk away from. Transition is at the core of what we do as an FFRDC. So what resources are available for organizations who want to secure their networks from wireless attacks, and what should their next steps be?
Yeah, that's a great question too, right? And you're absolutely right. We're not here, like you said, we're not here to hide. We're not here to do something cool and say we did this, good job, right? We are here to help serve the public and the military, right? And everything, right? You mentioned them all, right? Academia, industry, the government, just the general public, right? I think just being aware of the resources that are out there, right? And hopefully we can help do that with this podcast, right? And the things that we do and our blog posts, right? The SCI is very good at, having things out there that try to help people understand the challenges between our Cyber Minutes, YouTube videos, these podcasts, our blogs, all of those things, the conferences that we attend, the interactions that we have, right? Just maintaining that reputation of the expertise that we have and how we can share it, right? And I think next steps, right, is, just if you have questions or you want to know, right, just reach out to us. We have resources constantly, and we are always happy to help. Again, as an FFRDC, that's what we're here for. And, I think, if you see our booth at a conference, come and ask questions. If you have a question, the blog posts and the transcript for this podcast will have links, resources that you can reach out and look at, right? And we have the info at SCI, the email, right? So there are ways to just try and figure out how can I make sure that my data is safe and the things that I'm doing are intelligent from a security standpoint.
Exactly. Yeah, well said, Joe. I mean, it's SCI just is that place where the little Venn diagrams of curiosity, service to each other, and service to our country, and just a desire to have a strategic outcome come together.
Yeah.
And everything you've just described there it radiates that point right there. So, Joe, we're coming to the end of our podcast, and I do have some closing fun questions for you. So it's going to get really fun here. But,
all right, I'm ready.
Before we get into those, what's next for you? What are you working on that we can bring back in a few months to discuss? Because I have a feeling our listeners are going to like this podcast, and they're going to ask for us overwhelmingly to come back and do another interview. So for a Joe and Mike interview part 2, what are the things that you can highlight as just foreshadow for our listeners?
That's a great question. So one of the things that we're really looking at, right, again, building on the things that I've talked about, right, that's expanding to more protocols, more waveforms, more standards outside of just 802.15.4 where we start. Another thing that we're really looking at is radio frequency propagation models. So one thing that I didn't really talk about in my intro is modeling and simulation, and I've done a lot of that too, right? So for those of you that don't know, right, in the world of I have a transmitter and I have a receiver. Can I get a message from here to here wirelessly? We do what's called radio frequency propagation modeling, and that looks at things like the propagation of the signals, right? How do they get from point A to point B, or from point A to point B through Z sort of things, or multi-transmitters, right? And it's a really complex and mathematical field, right? And it's hard to one of the challenges in modeling and simulation is the realism, right? Like you can write a model, and this is not just for RF, this is for any modeling and simulation, right? You can do a mathematical model, but you have to validate it with real world collections, right? And a lot of the models that were written to do things like propagation were written forever ago. And they're really great. They're in, like Fortran, which is science level code that's awesome for those type of things, but they're slow because they were written before things like parallelism and the modern computing platforms that we have now existed, right? So one of the things that we're really looking at is how can we help to either parallelize that code or write algorithms as part of that code to help speed it up. And the goal there, right, to speed up the processing, the computation time, is to help push it to the edge, right? So when we have someone in the field that is experiencing multiple interference transmitters, right, jammers, whatever, and it's affecting their mission in some way, how they do it now is, right, they'll have a mission plan and they'll say, okay, these are the frequencies you use, these are the comms you use, this is the power level, right? Go do. And you get in the field and you experience interference in things that you don't expect. And a lot of the warfighters are great at fixing that on the fly, but we don't have the resources to be able for them to say, okay, like, let me recalculate real quickly, right? Because it's like, well, that model takes, 14 hours to run it, and that's not an exaggeration, right? I mean, the way that they do it works great, right? But at the edge, it doesn't work, right? So we're looking at ways, how can we help accelerate those things, and working with folks in our AID department, the artificial intelligence department, right, who do things like creating machine learning models to do signal identification, and how can we push those to smaller form factor type things at the edge. So
excellent,
maybe we'll
Joe.
come back and talk about that. We'll bring someone else
lovely
from the ACL to help. The Advanced Computing Lab.
That would be amazing. I think that's multiple podcasts going forward.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we're going to close with a couple questions to Joe. And the reason I'm doing this, okay, it may be on the subject, it may not be, but I want to try to bring the listeners into maybe if you were in the SCI walking around, you might hear one of these questions being asked to somebody in a hallway because we like to have fun too, right? You want to come in, you want to make a difference, but at the same time, you want to enjoy what you do. Yeah. So I have a couple fun questions to ask Joe to kind of demonstrate, some of the conversations we may actually have after this podcast.
All right.
So the first one, Joe, what is a superpower you would like to have for one day, whether it's professional or personal?
That's a great question. So this takes me back to, the college days when you're like, if you could have any 2 X-Men powers, what would they be?
Exactly.
Right? And, and I was always a fan of Magneto's, right? Like to be able to, by the way, my 2 are Magnetos and Wolverines, right?
Nice.
Because there's metal everywhere, and the magnetic field is always around us, right? So, and I sort of hinted at I've done a lot of magnetic field testing in my day too.
Yes.
But and then very little can hurt you if you can control metal everywhere, right? And then if you do get hurt, you have the fast healing of Wolverine, right? So
wow, that is a heck of a superpower.
What about you? Nah, you don't get off.
Yours was definitely a very intelligent answer. Mine was simple, just teleportation. I would love to get like a cup of tea in Madrid and then pop up in Tokyo for a few minutes and maybe just understand, some culture there. And I'd probably just bounce around the world for 24 hours and just try to take in as much as I could.
There you go. That's a good one.
But I'm not controlling magnetic fields. I wouldn't know what to do if I could control a magnetic field. All right, so this is a fun one. What's a goal you have no business chasing, but you might just do it anyways?
That's a good one. I often,
I'll let you off the hook for a second. When I thought about this myself, as you think about it, I think I'm going to dedicate myself to perhaps become the world's leading expert in office walk-up songs. I think it's a space that nobody has kind of conquered yet, and I think it's wide open. So I already have two. I have mine and yours, and I think I can build upon that. So that's probably going to be the aimless task that I'm going to go for.
That's a good one. That's a good one. I think I've always, as we've hit on, I'm also a music fan, right?
Yes.
And so, I've tried a couple of times to compile a list of, and I know these lists exist, right? But like, what are the essential albums that you have to listen to before you die, right?
Yes.
And they span all genres, right? But what makes a good album, right? When you and I like to think about, right? Like when you listen to Ride the Lightning, like it's all killer, no filler, right? Like there's not a bad song on that album, but what makes it that way, right? And where does that translate to, an Elton John album that might be the same or whatever, right? Like, that. So it's a daunting task to listen to everything and then be able to assess. So.
Joe, I think we found a new space here, that intersection between music and software engineering. I think this is something we can build upon here.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm gonna ask one last question. If listeners were to remember one thing from this podcast, and it's definitely not music, but one thing from everything that you have discussed here and shared with us, what would be that one thing you want those listeners to walk away with?
Yeah, I think that one thing is that wireless signals are all around us, and we use them every day, and we have to understand the implications of that, right? And make smart decisions or gather information, use the resources to make sure that we're doing things in a secure way, right? So that our information is not shared, our personal information, our names, our passwords, things that could be exploited. And, on some level, you can say, like, I can hide in the noise of 50 million TikTok users, but what happens when it's not, right? What happens when it is you that is compromised? So.
Well, I appreciate that, Joe. Great answer, and it's been a privilege doing this podcast with you today. And I'm just so proud that the listeners got a chance to actually hear from a true SCIer that is paving future pathways and things like that. It's incredibly inspiring to know that the best and brightest that I've ever met are here doing everything they can to serve the public interest. So thank you for that, Joe. So we've had a wonderful journey today, and for our audience, as previously mentioned, we will include links in the transcript to resources mentioned in this podcast. So finally, a reminder to our audience that our podcasts are available everywhere you find podcasts, including SCI's YouTube channel. And if you liked in what you saw and heard today, give it a thumbs up. And we definitely appreciate you joining us today. Thank you.
Thanks.